Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time once again for Closing the Wealth Gap. The one show, maybe the only show that shows you how to close the wealth gap in your own life with the man who's done it for many, our wealth coach himself, Tyrone French. Hey, Tyrone.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Closing the Wealth Gap. I'm your host, Tyrone French. Man, it's really good to be back. I was took a short break, but we're on this tour now, the comeback tour.
I love it.
And we're here to stay. So I got my good friend in the background, Mr. Paul Roberts. Paul, how you doing, buddy?
We've missed you. Where you been?
Yeah, it's been a while.
I feel like I've been wandering in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights here, waiting, trying to wonder what makes sense of the world around us. And without diving into politics, we're doing this in May of 2025. The world has certainly changed a lot in 3-4 months.
Yes,
and the economy has certainly changed. And our society is trying to wrestle with some kind of change. Are we going in this direction? Are we going in this direction? Let's start with the one that shocks me the most. Tariffs. We suddenly launched this tariff war. And I'm not sure what it was all about. Was it about, I'll give you my 4 thoughts here, and then you're going to tell me it's none of those, or which one it is. Did we start a tariff war with China and the rest of the world? Canada, Mexico. Canada's sitting back going, what did we do? How did we get pulled into this fight here? Europe and everywhere here. Did we do it because, one, partly we said with China and even Mexico and Canada, we said because you're letting fentanyl come into the country, so we're going to punish you until you clamp down on fentanyl. Canada says, we got no fentanyl coming through our country, so don't blame us. What do you fight with us for?
It's diversion.
So was it that? That was number one. Number two, then they started to say, no. It's really about the trade imbalance. We buy more of your stuff. You got to buy more of our stuff.
Diversion.
We're out of balance. And then it was, maybe there's a bigger picture here. We've spread ourselves. We make cars in Canada and Mexico and make a ton of stuff in China. We got to bring it back. We got to recreate jobs here. For our security, we can't be relying on other people, and we need to restore those factories magically back to all these small towns.
Biggest diversion.
Okay. And then the last one was, the cynical one is, no, this is just a way to raise the government to raise more revenue, tax revenue, tariff revenue, so that they can give it away to somebody else.
Bingo. and that's the big lie. That's the one that everybody's kind of gravitated on and kind of focused on.
Yeah.
First of all, you need to understand that a tariff is a tax.
Yeah.
And it's not a tax on the company, it's a tax on the consumer.
Right. It's another way to get money from you, to the government to collect money from you, the consumer.
But here's the thing. There's 2 things that the administration definitely don't like. They don't want to raise tax. They'd rather lower taxes for the top 1%.
Exactly. Massive tax thing. They're estimating. Here's the thing that nobody talks about that I noticed immediately. Before they've even announced the new tax cuts, before they've even announced the new tax breaks, before they've even announced the new budget, they quietly the debt ceiling $4 trillion.
Yes.
They already created a cushion. We know we're going to go up $4 trillion. That told me right away, then you already projecting this budget is going to add $4 trillion to the debt. Well, so suddenly they're slashing services, slashing federal agencies. They thought they'd slash $2 trillion. It turned out that was more like $100 billion.
Okay, so Paul, let me stop you, because again, that goes back to that diversion.
Yeah.
See, there's so many fires being set that people don't
everywhere.
know. They don't know how to concentrate on which ones to put out. They're not prioritizing properly.
Right.
But here's the thing: the administrations, they don't want to tax the rich.
No.
And they hate the IRS.
Yeah, that's another whole. That was my next question. how do you continue
So my
to
point is-
bring in revenue
Right.
if you remove the revenue collectors?
But listen, you got to follow the breadcrumbs.
I'm trying.
Don't go by.
I've been walking in the desert looking for the breadcrumbs.
Don't
there.
go by what people say. Go by what they do.
Okay.
So if I don't want to raise taxes on the top 1% because the top 1% don't like taxes,
No.
they want to eliminate the tax. They don't want to be
Absolutely.
taxed. They don't want to be taxed at all.
Right.
If you're looking at the taxing authority,
And can I stop you for 1 second? So they keep saying, last time Trump was in office, his ideal president was Andrew Jackson, who was a disruptor. He came from what was then considered the West, and he was feisty and combative and everything. So that was his model. He put his bust in there. Now, all of a sudden, they've revived a guy I had to go look up again, William Polk, the Republican elected in 1900, because he was a believer in tariffs and tariffs, and he was an expansionist. He's the one that sent the Navy around the world and to the Philippines and to Japan and all this kind of stuff. He and that was the last era of the Gilded Age, the last of the robber barons, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, and all this stuff.
now, do you mean Theodore Roosevelt? Because he's the one sent out. It was the Great White Fleet.
That's right. Well, Teddy Roosevelt was the vice president for
Teddy
McKinley, and then McKinley's assassinated, and Teddy comes in.
Right.
So that period of the 1890s to the early 1900s is now what they're idealizing, when there was no income tax. The government only made money from tariffs,
There you go.
and we were in an expansionist mode. We're going to take on the world and conquer, build the Panama Canal and all these things. And
The reason you have an advantage is because you studied history.
oh yeah,
But the average consumer doesn't understand history.
no, not at all.
So again, when you look at the IRS and wanted to abolish the IRS, when was the IRS instituted? When did they pass that law?
I think it was like 1920s or something.
1913.
10, 20, yeah.
1913.
Yeah.
What year did the Federal Reserve was the Federal Reserve Act go into effect?
I don't
the
know,
law.
but somewhere around that time period, probably.
1913.
Right.
1913. So what entity is giving Trump the hardest, the biggest fight right now? It's not the Supreme Court. It's
No.
the Federal Reserve.
Yeah. Right. He's threatening to fire the Fed chairman, which is questionable if he can even do that, but because he's pressuring him to lower interest rates.
Jerome Powell told him to go pack sand.
He did. He did. He didn't put it that bluntly, but that's what he said.
But he stood up to Trump. And again, and I'm not trying to make this political, but we're talking about the different institutions that have been running this country, and they've been norms for eons. And so now you see these institutions starting to, like when you mentioned Andrew Jackson.
Yeah.
There was I can't remember the Supreme Court ruling, but they ruled against his administration. And he told them, okay, you ruled against me, now enforce it.
Yes, exactly. Where's your army?
Where's your army?
Yeah.
And so
Exactly.
history doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme.
It sure does.
And the thing we've managed as a country, as a republic, to weather all these storms. This is no different. United States is going to be fine. We're going to get through this, but will it look the same? No.
So
Oh.
one of the things that they're really clearly struggling with some kind of change. There's a huge force that wants to change, and part of this force wants to roll back to a time when they thought America was the greatest. Trump talked about this with this 1890s McKinley, Teddy Roosevelt kind of stuff. When we were at our zenith, he said. Somehow that's when industrialization had just started in the 1870s and 1880s. These giant fortunes that nobody had ever imagined were being made. Carnegie and Steel, Mellon and banking, all these sudden entities were being created as this new world of industrialization. I thought it's exactly like we're going through with the tech revolution, where giant fortunes are being made, bigger than we could have ever imagined. Now it's billions, not millions, and everybody wants to roll back the regulatory power of the federal agency to go back to a period of, they used to call it laissez-faire.
Laissez-faire.
Let it be. Let it go.
Free enterprise.
Yeah, there was no oversight. The federal government wasn't there to create rules or regulations or restrict trade in any single way. And so the robber barons could build the giant mansions and had to eventually sell the giant mansions because suddenly they were being taxed. And when in a world when there was no income tax, whatever you made was yours.
And that's how it was sold. The income tax, it was sold based on taxing the rich.
Right.
And so that's what got the majority of Americans to really, be for it. But it wasn't until they changed the tax, because it used to be a time you could file your income taxes on one piece of paper.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and again, it was the rich that was doing it. But just like anything else, it morphed to whereas now the rich weren't paying taxes. It was
because they got tax breaks,
it was the
and
middle
tax write-offs.
That's right.
And,
it was the middle class, because you got to think about it. During that Gilded Age, during that period of time when you had all these the Industrial Revolution,
right.
That's when you got your middle class.
That's true.
That's when the middle class came in.
That's absolutely 100%. You're 100% correct. Because up to that point, there was the poor and there was the wealthy.
Right.
There was the worker and there was the guy that owned the factory.
Right.
Owned the farm, really.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'll tell you another interesting thing that I heard. I'll have you comment.
But stay on this, because this is really important.
Well, I'm going to go down a little side note for a second. I heard Warren Buffett say this recently. He said, or maybe he'd said it before and I just read it, but he said they're trying to explain the massive amount of money that people make now off of technology. Billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that Facebook and Amazon and Microsoft and all these guys have made. And he said, it's all about scalability. He said it was hard to build a bigger farm.
Right.
You could have more acres than anybody else, but you couldn't make that much more out of the farm that you had. You just had to have more land.
Right.
So you went to big ranches and bigger farms, and the Yellowstone kind of story of the TV series Yellowstone, the biggest ranch in the town. But there's only so much you could get out of that.
Right.
Then you went to industrialization, and I didn't have to have one farm, one plant. I could have plants all over the world, all over the country. So now I could run one. My business wasn't just raising cattle or raising sheep or raising corn on my farm. It was making it in my factory, and I suddenly found out how to multiply factories all over the place and run lots of factories. So now I could make more money than any farmer had ever imagined, Rockefellers and banking systems and stuff. Now it's even greater because I'm just selling an idea.
Right. But here's the thing. It goes back to shareholder profits.
Okay.
Shareholder profits. So when Henry Ford basically created the assembly line, because that was revolutionary at that time.
Right.
What he wanted to do,
the product moved down the line, and somebody put on the car or the wheels and the windshield and the brakes and everything else, rather than the old way of a team assembled it. When they were done, they assembled another one.
Right. So basically, what he wanted to do was let his employees share in that revenue.
Absolutely, $5 a day workforce.
He wanted people to be able to afford the cars that they were building, and so again, voila! Now you got this middle class,
right?
And so
he paid them enough to buy his product,
and he wanted to pay them more until there was a lawsuit by Dodge, the Dodge brothers, and what they did was said, Henry Ford, his responsibility is not to his employees. His responsibility is to the shareholders.
I didn't know that.
And to this day,
I know a lot about the story of Ford and the Dodge brothers and all that. At one time, the Dodge brothers worked with Ford, or were going to sell their company to Ford.
Yes.
And all that stuff.
Yeah. But to this day, that's when the emphasis is not on the employees. The emphasis is on the shareholder. That's where it came from.
And the other thing I'll add to that from my study of history, that turned all the great industrialists against their workers was unionization. It was one thing for me to give you something and decide how much you're going to get. It's another thing when you demanded it from me and you expected and you forced me to give it to you. And Ford pushed back huge against against unionization to the point he hired a guy who was basically a thug to be his number two guy, his head of security, and his job is to go bust up the unions and bust up heads.
Yes.
Anybody that wanted to join the union isn't going to get one very far, and they had giant strikes, and go look it up. It was a really so suddenly the guy who was all pro-labor, I'm going to pay you more than you've ever done so that you can buy my car, but then when you want more, I pushed back.
But the issue became he decided to do that after the law had changed.
Yeah.
And
that I didn't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So people, they wanted, the idea was already out there. And to give them that idea and then pull it back, So then that's when it's like, okay, well, we're gonna have to unionize. We're gonna have to create a union, and so they had union busters, and then these weren't just riots. These were people were getting killed.
Bust your heads.
Yeah, I mean shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you had they said, well, we're going to fire these guys. So now you had this whole reality of scabs coming in.
Right.
People that weren't, they weren't a part of the union.
Right.
So it's like, and they could pay them less money.
Right.
So that whole idea came from that lawsuit of the Dodge brothers. And again, it's still going on to this day.
So it's now the purpose of the company isn't to enrich the employees. Even if that money will be reinvested by the products, the purpose is to enrich the investors.
So, and think about this. Think about this. Most people have 401ks.
Yeah.
And they want their 401k to grow.
Yeah.
They want it to grow as large as they can for their retirement.
So they're investors.
They're investors. And so you want the company to do well.
Which means cut back costs.
Which cut back on costs and start laying people off. Yeah. So you're creating your own demise.
Yeah.
You're creating your own demise.
Well, I don't think people realize that if this current administration succeeds in the overhaul of America's society, two things may result as a recovery. I think there's a big push within the people supporting the current regime. One is to roll it back to the 1890s, no taxes, no regulations, laissez-faire, do what you want world. That's what they're idolizing and seeking to turn all this stuff back the last 100 years. And the other thing is the offshoring, which was done because it was cheaper. The Walmartization of the world. There's a word I made up.
Okay.
We bought the idea of Walmart, and it killed local communities. Walmart came in. I saw this in the Midwest all over the place. All my relatives.
Paul, you know what you're doing? You're regurgitating the narrative. And see, the thing is, I want you to talk, but the thing is, you're still regurgitating the narrative. You're not looking. You touched on it, even based on the debt ceiling.
Yeah.
And the reason that the debt ceiling has to be raised is because that money was already spent.
It was already spent.
So they had to raise the debt limit, or guess what? The United States would default on their debt.
Right.
So when people talk about the debt in the United States, they may think about a balance sheet as far as income and expense.
Right.
The debt is based on Treasury notes and Treasury bills.
That's what they sell to raise the debt.
to other countries, right. and to citizens. Yeah, but for the most part, the Federal Reserve and other countries. And our biggest debt holder is not China. It's Japan.
That I didn't know. I thought I would have said China.
No, it's Japan. But here's the thing. China and Japan decided that they were going to pull their money out of the United States. Mm-hmm. That's when they decided to lower the tariffs. That's when they got into negotiations, because the United States cannot afford to give that money back to Japan and China. See, what people don't understand.
We ain't got it.
Here's the thing. The bond market makes the stock market looks like a thimble. It's like the bond market is like the ocean.
Particularly, you're talking like Treasury notes and
yes,
bonds.
The bond market based on, because that a bond is considered debt.
Yeah.
And again, people don't look at
obligation.
They don't associate the two. It's an obligation. It's a debt obligation, and it's just like you use the term IOU.
Right.
IOU. Your check is an IOU. The
right.
dollar bill that you have is an IOU.
Right.
But that's for the borrower. The lender is I own you. I own you. So
I see.
So China and Japan said,
own us.
We own you. So you're making these. You're trying to create these tariffs in an unfair situation. We'll just take our money back, and because those funds aren't there, then now you got to negotiate. That's how you come back to the table.
Because just take a look at what you're saying. So you're saying before they even put out the budget, we know that we're going to add $4 trillion to that. This is going to be upside down $4 trillion again here. We're going to give so much tax. We're going to take in less revenue by giving taxes money back to people. We're not collecting taxes, and we're going to spend more. We're going to raise less income and spend more. We already know it's $4 trillion, so we quietly raised the $4 trillion debt. Then we started attacking these other countries in a trade war, and they said, fine, then we'll take our money back.
And you're not asking why. The question is why. Why would you do that? Because the majority of the revenue that's generated from income tax goes to service the debt. It pays the interest on the debt. Doesn't wipe out the debt. It pays the interest on the debt.
Interest on
right.
The debt.
To keep the credit keep the credit level of the United States at a respectable level so that people can give us more money.
Because all right, so here's the question. Nobody answers this question. I'm going to attack you with the toughest question of the day here.
I'm sitting down.
Okay. So what if Trump does what he did with all his properties through the years, the casinos, the airlines, and all? He just goes back to the borrower and says, I ain't got it. We better renegotiate the debt. I ain't got it. I'm not paying you. I default on the debt. What if the United States, under Trump or somebody, just goes back to China, Japan, all these people, and says, you know what? I know you gave us $36 trillion. You're holding in IOUs. We ain't got it. It's time to admit it. We're going to have to restructure this debt. Well, we'll give you half.
So let me put it to you like this, in a way that the average person can understand this. Let's say if you got a credit card,
right,
and your credit card company calls you, and you've lost your job, or you didn't plan properly,
right,
and you tell your creditor, well, I don't have the money,
right.
I don't have it. So guess what's going to happen to your credit score?
Crashes.
It's going to crash.
Right.
So the United States have institutions that grade the solvency of the United States. It's called Standard & Poor's.
Right.
It's called Moody's.
Right.
It's called Weiss. And so the average American
third
doesn't
parties
understand
that tell
this.
everybody what your credit rating is. So what?
Goes back to credibility.
So that just means we can't borrow more money for a while.
So here's the problem.
Does that mean the party ends and deficit spending is over?
See, the United States will never go bankrupt because we can print all the money that we need. We can print all the dollars that we need. The problem is it causes inflation.
Yeah, exactly.
Because now you got more dollars circulating in the economy.
Right.
So the issue is not just the dollars that's in the United States, because you got dollars and you got credit. So you gotta factor in the dollars and the credit. But when those dollars are not circulating outside of the United States, see, the United States is a reserve currency.
Meaning what?
Meaning that the United States is the currency of the world.
Exchange. We all exchange in dollars.
Right. So just like buying oil, we call them oil dollars. You can't petroleum dollars.
Petrodollars.
Yeah, petrodollars. You can't. Well, petroleum.
Right.
Tomato. You can't buy oil without using dollars. Russia and China decided to start using precious metals to do that. Gold.
That's the exchange. I'll give you so much in gold for that barrel.
Exactly, because everything is a trade. So what happens to all of those dollars that were abroad? They start coming back home. So if now you got more dollars circulating in the economy, guess what that does to inflation and prices?
Jacks it up.
So it's not that prices are going up. It's not that things are more expensive. It's the dollar is being devalued. And that's what people don't understand. That's what they need to get.
I don't understand. And so the three worries they always talk about, it seems like once a year when the debt ceiling needs to get raised, is one, how much debt can we support? How much can we service? When is it too much? We just can't pay it. And there doesn't seem to be a limit.
But again, you're not asking why. Why do we have to raise the debt limit? Why? Why do we have to do it?
Because we keep spending more than we take in.
We have to do it because everything is cause and effect. Everything is causation. We have to raise the debt limit to keep our credibility, keep our rating high. You want to have, if you have investments, you want to have A-rated investments. If you got bonds, you want to have AAA-rated bonds.
One of the crazy things I always thought about credit cards is when I got a credit card and I went over the limit, they just raised my limit. And as long as I could make the payment, they raised it again. And so where they used to restrict you, when you first get a credit card, they say you can only spend $1,000.
Right.
We don't know what you're going to do.
Right.
And then so I spent $1,500. And I said, what do you think of that? And they say, as long as I made the payment on time, we think you're a good guy. You went over the limit. I'll tell you what, no problem. You now can spend $2,000. And so now I spent not just I spent $2,500.
And guess why? Again, everything goes back to why.
Why?
Because
Yeah.
your credit rating hadn't changed.
Right.
So they were able to do that because you still had the same credit rating. And here's the thing, and it had been reported. It was reported under a 30-day period. Had it been reported later than 30 days, your credit rating would have dropped, and they would not extend that credit to
So
you.
the crazy thing is, the more they told me I have a limit, and every time I went over the limit, they just increased my limit.
Based on your credit worthiness.
But all it did is increase my debt. So suddenly I could spend $3,000, then I could spend $5,000, I could spend $10,000. So now I'm just carrying more debt.
Because I own you.
Yeah, I don't think they ever wanted me to pay it off.
You owe me, but I own you.
Here's another crazy thing.
Here's the thing, that this is why they don't want you to pay it off. Because their business is debt.
Yeah,
Okay?
right.
So they call it credit. And that's to get you to apply. Because nobody's going to apply for debt. Nobody's going to apply for bondage. So they call it
I sign up for bondage.
But here's the thing. Once they loan you
love
money,
it.
they're loaning you money at a certain percent, a certain percentage rate. Okay?
Yeah.
So they're making money by them loaning you money and you paying it back. Now you become an income producing asset for that institution.
And here's the other crazy thing. On some level, they hope I don't pay it because then they jack the interest rate up from whatever that was, 5%, 10% to 25%.
So now it costs you more money, or it costs you more money to borrow less money.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll cost you more money to borrow less money.
And suddenly the debt balloons. It's like the loan shark. I can never pay it back. The interest is so much that I'm buried under the interest, and I can't even pay off the principal.
So let me
anymore.
give you another example. Let's say you got two lenders,
Yeah.
and one is going to lend you $100,000 at 10%,
Right.
and the other lender is going to lend you $100,000 at 5%. Who are you going to go with?
Cheaper.
Okay, so if you start hemorrhaging, countries don't want to invest in you anymore because you didn't keep your promise. Now you got to increase your rate. You have to increase your rate,
Yeah.
or you
Your
have
risk-
to decrease your rate based on what the market is telling you.
Right. You're a higher risk.
You're a higher risk.
So, one, where the debt is now up to $36 trillion. I remember when Obama was president, it hit 10 or 15 trillion, and people were screaming on the right, "This is unsustainable. We can't support this much debt. No, we've never had this much debt." Now we're double that. We're over double that, and we could hit 50 trillion by the end of the next 4 years at the rate we're going.
And you know what? It doesn't. I would tell you the same thing. It doesn't matter.
That's what Reagan said. It doesn't matter.
That's what Dick
The
Cheney
deficit.
said.
Dick
They
Cheney.
don't care about deficits.
Right. But isn't there a time when you just can't, when the interest is so much on that debt that you cannot make the payment
Again, the United States,
without just printing more money, which just drives
the
inflation
United
crazy?
States is never going to go bankrupt because they can print money, enough money to print themselves out of any situation.
But you're
The problem is when you're dealing with the average consumer. See, wealthy people, the wealthy loves inflation.
Say that again.
The wealthy loves inflation. And you got,
Why?
but you got to think about it. Why would somebody wealthy? Why would they want inflation?
I don't know.
Prices are higher. So the things that I own, I can sell for more money.
If I own lots of stuff, my stuff goes up.
The value goes up. Now it's
My
it's an
cars,
illusion.
my house,
It's an illusion, right?
Right.
But the value of it goes up. So again, just like having precious metals. Imagine I bought an ounce of gold back in 1972.
Okay.
Okay, I don't have the graph in front of me,
But it's probably, what, $1,000 or something?
no, it was a lot less than that. A lot less than that. But anyway,
Okay.
fast forward today, that same coin will be worth over $3,000. Did the coin change? No, the value changed.
Right.
So it's the same thing with real estate. My parents bought their house for $36,000 back in 1971.
Right.
Now it's worth $800,000, $900,000.
Yeah.
Almost $1 million. Did the property change? Did the house change? No. What changed? Inflation. It's not. It's the devaluation of the dollar.
Okay, so let's see if we can tackle two or three of these in the time left here. So one is the debt limit, just goes up and up and up, I guess forever. But then don't you risk, the only way to pay it off is to print more of those funny money, that's dollars, which happened in, as you're well aware, in the Weimar Republic, the German Republic between World War I and World War II had the greatest inflation I think ever in the history. They literally pay people in the morning because by the afternoon the bread would be double the price.
Right. That's hyperinflation.
And why did they do it? Because the Allies after World War I put such a punishing debt load. Reparations. You got to pay for this war that you caused. We're going to cripple you with debt. And they did. And the only way eventually the government could pay the debt, if I understand correctly, is to start printing more money.
And a lot of times the debt was forgiven. You got to understand that too. See, majority of the debt is accumulated by the Federal Reserve.
Right.
Now, so the Trump administration wants to actually the Republicans, a lot of Republicans want to do away with the Federal Reserve.
Yes.
Why? Because they want to go back to the gold standard.
Right.
And what will that do to the price of gold and silver, precious metals?
Skyrocket.
Because the dollars that we used to have was tied to precious metals.
You could turn it in for an ounce of it was redeemable.
Yeah, it's redeemable. I still have those notes.
You could have that piece of paper and it said on there redeemable for a certain amount of hard metal.
So now it's only based on the good faith of the United States.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that, when I say good faith of the United States, the workers that's generating, that's
so
with the corporate that's helping the corporations.
Are we going to go back to a deregulator where the government doesn't step in and try and regulate commerce and regulate the size of industries and regulate environment and regulate all the rules that were put in the 20s and 30s and 40s? Because the robber barons went crazy. They had child labor. They were working people to death. They were fire traps. The food was poisoned, and people died from it. And the
kids are working. They had children literally working in factories.
Yeah, and
look at what's happening in Florida right now.
They just want to lower again and make 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds be able to go work in factories again. I mean, the whole thing seems like they want
not just the factories, but also in the fields.
Yeah, right. Put kids out picking cotton again here, or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to use that illusion here, but it just feels like slavery again here. Yeah.
So, but here's the thing. This is why I'm hopeful, Paul. The economy is a living, breathing organism.
Okay.
And it breathes. It inhales and it exhales. It expands and it contracts. And as long as it's alive, it's going to continue to do that. People just forget, based on history, they haven't lived long enough sometimes to go through certain things, so they got to read about it.
Yeah.
And if you're not reading about it, you're not going to know about it. So it's just like a sine wave in electronics. It's going to go positive and negative, positive and negative. So the economy does the same thing. It's just like you call it a business cycle. It expands, it contracts. And so based on the expansion and contractions, laws are changing, regulations are changing. But when people get to the point where they're opening up canned food and there's mold in the can, or the USDA is not regulating the meat, so they're getting sick, all of a sudden, that's when people start
Airplanes are crashing.
Airplanes are crashing.
Because we're firing the air traffic controllers, all of
so
those.
How far, the question is how far can you go before people really start
screaming?
Yeah. And here's the thing. When people cannot afford to feed them, and I know we get short on time, but when people cannot afford to feed themselves, that's when revolution starts.
Yeah.
That's when it starts. And so now what they're trying to, even with the homeless in California, they threw a lot of money into homelessness. Mm-hmm. And people, they took the money. They weren't solving the problem. Now they understand, wait a minute, we have to solve this problem. We got to get these people off the street. We got to get them housed. Because when people lose hope and they become desperate people are dangerous.
Dangerous. That's when revolutions take place.
That's when they take place.
That's when they come with pitchforks to the palace, and when you casually say in the French Revolution, "Let them eat bread, let them eat cake."
No, that's when in the modern age they're going to have a on the T-shirt. It's going to say, "We don't like cake. We don't eat cake." Then what do you do?
Then what do you do? I wonder. I fear, like many of us, and I welcome a calm, long view on what's happening based on a understanding of where we've been, where we're headed, because we're here. Clearly there's a large force at hand trying to change everything. Now, whether it rolls it back to what it was or it rolls it into something different we've never seen before, I don't know.
Can I tell you?
We're clearly at an inflection point where that's tipping one way or the other here.
You remember back in the you had, I think it was the late 50s when you had McCarthyism.
Yeah, that's when I was born.
Yeah, here's the situation though. That was one person
Yeah.
that created chaos in the government.
Upheaval. Hollywood and the government and everything. People were
Right.
blacklisted and ruined their lives because they had somebody suggested you might be a communist.
One person started that.
Yeah.
Okay, you remember his name?
It was Senator Joseph McCarthy.
Exactly.
And can I tell you another interesting thing?
Sure.
You may or may not know this. And his right-hand man was a crazy, hot-headed attorney named Roy Cohn, who later on went and worked for the Trump organization. And Donald Trump always says in his first race, "Where's my Roy Cohn?"
Who was his mentor?
That was his Roy Cohn was his mentor.
So again, follow the dots. Don't
Yeah.
go by what people are telling you. Go by what they do.
Yeah.
And so look at the history. It's all unfolding right in front of
And
us.
Roy Cohn's tactics in the McCarthy era and everything else, if you accused him and said that's wrong, he would immediately attack you and smear you. Well, not only are you a liar, you're a cheat, you're a scoundrel, treasonous, and everything else. It's like
he was projecting.
Yeah, it's like this. Imagine, this is the story I always explained it. So imagine your wife walks in on you, and you're in bed with another woman. She says, "What are you doing? You're in bed with another woman." He says, "No, I'm not. You're imagining. What are you, crazy? I'm just here by my... There's a woman right there. I can see her." So she brings in her friends, and she says, "See, there's another woman, and I prove it. I'm not crazy. I can see it." And he says, "Well, it's only because of you."
Yeah.
"What do you mean?" "Well, you wouldn't kiss me or treat me right or whatever, so you forced me to do this."
Yeah.
And so so pretty soon you're on the defensive, and suddenly you're defending yourself. I found you in bed with another woman, and suddenly first you're telling me I'm making it up. It's fake news, and then you're telling me it's my fault.
Yeah, there was a rapper who created this song, and it's almost similar scenario.
Yeah.
But all he said was, "It wasn't me."
Yeah. Well,
Wasn't me.
Wasn't me. Well,
But again, one thing Roy Cohn, he pretty much told Donald Trump is to never admit you're wrong.
never. And when someone comes at you, you come at them 10 times harder. If you're going to
Yes.
come after me, I'm going to make your life miserable. I'm going to throw 1 million frivolous lawsuits at you. I'm going to bury you in lawsuits, so you're never going to want to come after me again.
But again, here's the thing. This is not really bashing somebody. This is saying why is this happening, and going back to the origin story
Right.
and saying this is why. So why is important. If you don't understand why,
This is how
you're
he was trained to do
powerless.
business, right?
Exactly.
First you deny. First you deny it didn't happen. Then you say, if it did happen, I'm not going to say I'm sorry. I was wrong, or ever. You turn it around into something. It was a good thing that this happened. It's a good thing I'm in bed with another woman. And then in retaliation, anybody that attacks you, you bury them. You overwhelm them with negative press and insinuations and smears and everything, and lawsuits and everything else, so that the next person says, I'm not taking this person on. I'm not even going to try.
And guess what? All press is good press.
Yeah.
So when the rumors get out that you cheated on your wife and you did all this stuff, guess what? They're talking about you.
Yeah, and I'm I'm a big tough guy, and
No, your name
cocky.
is out there. You're in the media.
Yeah.
So it goes back to the law of attraction. Energy goes, or energy flows where attention goes. Energy flows where attention goes.
I never heard that.
Yeah. So based on everybody talking about a certain politician,
Even
or
if
whoever,
it's bad.
you're getting the energy.
Well, I'm feeling the energy just having you back in the studio again. Welcome back on your comeback tour, Tyrone French. We've missed you. We need you now now more than ever.
I'm glad to be back. I enjoyed the conversation with you, Paul. It's always a joy, man.
Okay.
Always a pleasure.
How do they reach you if they want to hear more? Talk to you directly.
What I really want you to do is just download my app. Just go to TyroneFrenchApp.com or just pull out your phone and just text Tyrone French at 36260. Text Tyrone French at 36260, or go to my website, leave me a message, drop me an email. But you can always call me toll free 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
There's a message answering service.
It's an answering service. Just call, you dial 877-296-5192. And let me slow it down, 877-296-5192.
So at 2 o'clock in the morning when I can't sleep, I can call up and say, what the hell's going on?
I'll get a message notification. And when I get up, I'll give you a call.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming back. We need some sanity. We need to make sense of this. We need to sift through the noise and figure out what's really happening here.
Appreciate it.
And I welcome the chance for these conversations.
Same here.
That's our show for this week. Closing the Wealth Gap. The one show, the only show that shows you how to take control of your financial future. Right here in Orange County's only community radio station, OCTalkRadio.net.